Hi viewers and welcome back to Cameron James channel. Today we're going to be discussing STM QROPS in Malta for non-UK residents, US residents, wherever it might be. Maybe you've even gone back to the UK now as a UK resident, what your options are, and just sharing our experience here at Cameron James, as this is currently an area we get quite a few inquiries about. Good morning, Mr. Laws. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Mr. Laws is our in-house expert on the STM QROPS. He's going to be running through some real-life cases and scenarios today, letting people know what your options are and what our current experience has been. John, over to you if you want to give us a summary of the types of inquiries we receive at the moment from people who are holding a QROPS, Qualified Recognised Overseas Pension Scheme, with STM in Malta.
Yeah, so before I begin, just going to caveat that, yes, a lot of what I do say will apply to, the STM QROPS in particular, but there are all sorts of QROPS providers out there that also, a lot of this will apply to similar sort of issues and complaints and whatnot you get through from clients who have one. So typically, the standard response will be, hey, I moved abroad 10 years ago for work or retirement, and I've moved back to the UK, or I'm having some think about it. And anyway, when I was abroad, some so-and-so put me into a STM QROPS, into some offshore bond wrapper. I seem to don't have any more money than I started with. Perhaps I've even got less money than I started with 10 years ago. There's fees coming out. I have absolutely no idea where the heck they're coming from. There's no investment performance or anything. Should I be here? I'd really like to move somewhere else or get this sorted. Maybe I've moved back to the UK, or maybe I've just noticed this and I've read a blog online, or I've been in a forum online, or a YouTube video, or a Facebook group or something that says there's going to be better alternatives. So there really is a whole breadth of people, getting in touch saying, hey, I've got a QROPS, got an STM QROPS. Should I be somewhere else, or should I be doing something differently?
Yeah, and I think just to jump in straight away there's a point that I always make, that this is, for us, this is not an anti-STM video per se, because by default, STM is the QROPS. They are the trustee. The fee of a QROPS per year, I mean, whether it's £800 a year, £1,000 a year, or £1,200, whatever it is, depending on the size of your pension pot, it's a fixed fee from the trustee. QROPS might have slightly different things. Withdrawing money might cost 50 quid, or sending a paper statement might cost money, but actually, it's the products and the advice that's given inside the QROPS, which ultimately comes from the financial advisor who introduced the business to the QROPS, that in my experience is where 99% of the problems come in terms of poor performance, structured notes that have gone defunct, commission-paying funds, commission-paying bonds. So John, in your experience, what has been the relationship that people say with that financial advisor? Like, what's happened? Like, why are they not in contact with that financial advisor anymore, or why have they lost confidence in that financial advisor?
Yes, and to sort of quickly before your point, you're right, it is a tool, and STM recently have been purchased by a company that, from what we can see, has no association at all. So a lot of what we're saying now is going to relate to historical advice, stuff that happened 5, 10, 15 years ago, under different management, under different rules, under different levels of scrutiny, etc. And what we say now will probably very likely not be representative of what the experience would be like now taking out a new one. So this is really for those with existing assets who've already gone into it. So it's a really, really key point I want to bring up. But yes, what would have happened is, you moved abroad, your friend who didn't know any better recommended you to blah, blah, blah. And he turned up, met him for dinner. He had a sharp pinstripe suit on, etc. And he gave you all these reasons of why you want to take your money offshore and do all of this and do all of that. And you move really quickly and you sign some paperwork and you sign some this. You didn't really know what it was, but he kept telling you about the tax breaks, and the tax man in the UK is going to get you, and he's going to steal your tax money. He's going to steal your pension, and etc., etc. And you just signed it. Because that's the way they worked back then, and they pressured you and they manipulated you and their masters. And unfortunately, what really happened is they took you to the cleaners for all sorts of commissions, whether it was commissions for into the QROPS in the first place. Then there would be what's known as an offshore bond, typically held in the Isle of Man or Ireland or somewhere like that. Mauritius is another big one. They would have charged fees there. Then there were or commissions there, not fees. Then there would have been commissions in the actual investments themselves, structured notes, structured products. So a lot of people coming to us who, when I see, oh, I have an old STM QROPS, I know by the time I look at this, I'm going to be looking at 10 to 15%, if not higher, of initial commissions taken from a client. So the advisor's already made all his money. He took you to that. You put £1 million in that. That advisor, it's just, I don't know what the relationship is with his advisory company or whatnot, but probably got a 6-figure payday. He doesn't need to speak, or, I say he, it's not always he. There were very few women, especially then, working. So apologies if I keep using the word he, but I very rarely come across, women, unfortunately, selling these. And, you got to the situation where they've made all their money. They didn't need to get in contact with you anymore. Or maybe they got in contact 10 years later to sell you, oh, well, I've got a better provider now, I've got a better product, I've got a better investment. Let's take that money and reinvest it into that, which was another way to just churn you and make some more money. So, the advisor hasn't been heard from in a while because they made all their money. You can't make any changes. Your providers don't seem to respond to you because everything goes through the advisor who you can't see. And you're a bit like you're stuck in limbo, in a horrible predicament. Where you're sort of, treading water, and the only one who seems to be making money is the bloke who sold you the transfer rationale and the QROPS 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, there we go. Now we've put it straight. And I often found that when I was dealing with clients, it's almost it's difficult when you come across someone and they say, "Oh, I've got an STM QROPS with a XYZ, an utmost bond or an RF60 bond underneath." In my head, the alarm bells are already going off. I then get to see the portfolio. I'm like, oh Christ, they were invested in that property fund that was basically a scam and got liquidated, and they've lost 100% of the money in that fund. Thank God they only had 10% in it. I always had the problem with clients, like how honest I am, how honest should I be with the client? Okay, you went into an 8% offshore commission bond, you went into a 5% trail paying fund, which has gone liquidation. How honest with them are you in terms of how much commission they've actually paid these financial advisors? I used to always just say it. And I used to say to clients, look, this is the situation. This is actually how much commission you've paid. You might never have known 10 years ago the level of paperwork and diligence wasn't as strict as it is now. As Jonathan mentioned, this wouldn't fly now with nearly any QROPS providers. But I used to be very, very honest with clients. Some clients accept that and they say, Dominic, I always had a feeling. Thank you for your total transparency. Other clients don't like it. They don't like to be, you to be highlighting that maybe they didn't make a very good financial planning decision when they started working with that financial advisor. And again, the reason I say financial advisor is this isn't about STM QROPS being bad per se. It's about the tool of STM is just a QROPS. It's what the financial advisor put inside it. Jonathan, what would be your experience with that? That when you're brutally honest with clients and, you're obviously in a very polite and, whatever way of sort of outlining it to them, what's their response? Are they sort of happy for the transparency, or do they go into their shell and then not respond? Like, what's your general experience?
Yeah, it's one of those. I'm a bit like you. It's like, hey, I'm not here to try and paper over and cover up for the transgressions of what went on. Especially for me, a period where I wasn't in the I was in financial services, PwC, but not in the financial advice profession. So, I'm not going to try and, cover up for their sins. I will help them realize just how badly it was, because like a lot of these things, that the truth will set you free. And sometimes you got to put all this into the light. The light's the best disinfectant. And then hopefully you can realize, hey, look, it was a bad decision. You were manipulated, you were coerced, you were this, that, and the other. Now's the time to make the really right, correct, informed decision. You're not going to like what I put together in an advice report. By the time, I go off, we go off, one of our advisors goes off, gets all the information, the team, our due diligence team goes and gets all that information. What's in the report is not going to be nice. It's going to be more like a Stephen King novel, in terms of the level of horror as you page through it. And, we effectively tell you, the charges you've been paying, and then we do a comparison. Hey, if you'd have used a nice, transparent, fee-based financial advice firm like Cameron James, you'd have XYZ money in comparison, which is usually, significant sums of money higher. But that's the best way to deal with it. Otherwise, you might not realize how bad it is. You might just tread water, stay where you are, not make that big decision to look to improve it. And again, there's, just because you're in the QROPS doesn't mean you shouldn't be in the QROPS, as you've so rightly said. The QROPS is just a tool. The problem was, It's a bit like B&Q. If you think of the pension provider as like the B&Q, and they've got the cashiers. When the builder turns up and he wants a hammer, fantastic, you know that. But when a guy with crazy eyes turns up, he looks like he's going to go on a murdering spree, turns up, you don't let them buy the hammer. And that was sort of, unfortunately what happened. You allowed people with no qualifications, regulated in not very good jurisdictions, the Mauritiuses of the world or whatever, with insurance brokerage, insurance advices rather than investment advices, who would then just go off and have carte blanche to use your product to make as much money and not tell clients about it as possible. So, that's sort of where it is there. And again, like any tool, you use it rightly, you use it responsibly, you use it transparently, it's fantastic. Same with offshore bonds. Offshore bonds can be fantastic if in the right hands, done the right way, done transparently. Put them in the hands of someone who's not like that, they can be absolutely disastrous. Like you said, sometimes you read people tell you, oh, you hear a name, and your heart drops, and you're like, oh God, I'm not going to enjoy telling the client this. But that's it. That's the nature of the beast.
Yeah. And I was just about to say that to give an example, like I've come across, for example, whether it be an STM QROPS or another insert QROPS provider, the client's total expense ratio on an ongoing basis can be, say, 3.5%. I've even seen 4% before. But from a client perspective, when they signed their paperwork 10 years ago, they would have seen, STM QROPS, £1,000. And I'm just taking that as an example. Say you have £1 million pension portfolio, £1,000 out of £1 million is 0.1. It's actually a minimal cost in terms of the financial planning of that £1 million. But then it's the commission bond that was put underneath that was charging the client an extra 1 or 1.5% a year. It's then the underlying fund that's paying 2.5% TER on the underlying fund that sometimes might even be owned by the same advisory firm who advised that fund. So again, just to put this in context, that it's not always the QROPS, which is the problem, or from a cost perspective, 0.1% out of, say, 3.5% or 4% is a very small element of the cost there. And I think the other problem with this is that a trustee's responsibility is to look out for the interests of their clients, but it is not their responsibility, and they're not regulated to provide advice. So very often the client has come through the financial advisor. Most QROPS are advisor-led. I'm actually struggling to think of any QROPS which isn't advisor-led. So these clients are often in a position that even if they were to reach out to STM and say, I'm not happy with my financial advisor, they are a trustee, but they're not there to provide them advice on their investments, the cost, the charges, should have they gone into a bond. That's not really their responsibility. That was down to the advice that the financial advisor gave them. So John, for any of our viewers who have managed to get through what we're on now, 13 minutes of how terrible a decision they may or may not have made potentially 10 years ago, what is your advice now to people, and how have you helped people? What's the first steps they should do? What's the analysis you do? How can clients look to move forward from here if they feel they are potentially in an STM QROPS where they think the charges or the underlying platform, the bond, the underlying fees are too expensive? What would be your advice to them? How can you help them move forward?
Yeah, so the first thing to do is just don't do anything rash. Especially when you find out, XYZ's been charged you this, that, and the other. It doesn't mean you just need to sell it all or transfer out or transfer to someone else or transfer to a new product or whatnot. That's the first point of call. Take a deep breath. This is the time now to make a really fully informed, emotionless, logical decision with a properly, heavily regulated, well-qualified financial advisor with your best interests at heart. Thankfully, or not thankfully, depending on which way you want to look at it, I don't know of any, as you said, providers, especially if you're in Malta. Malta has rules around retail clients have to have an investment manager or a financial advisor, etc., be involved. And ditto, all the SIP providers I can think of. If for example, going back to a UK pension, which would be especially relevant for those who live in the UK. Now actually QROPS potentially have loads of benefits because of all these inheritance tax rules changes in the UK. But I don't know any providers that are compliant that don't require a financial advisor anyway to make the decision, to give you the advice to do it. So there are a lot of things there that are probably going to mean that you are at least getting proper regulated advice before you make this decision. But that's the thing. Don't panic. Go through a formal advice process. Figure out what you've got. Find out what's happened, what charges you paid, who's what. Because a lot of times people are like, who's STM? Who's Utmost? Who's RL360? Who's Providence? Who's this, that, and the other? People don't know. So, a bit of explanation, a bit of education, figure out where you are, and then you look at the options. And, a lot of that will also depend on where you're going to be retiring. Oh, you're going back to the UK? Okay, then the UK pension might be for you. Oh, you're staying in Europe and you've got no ties to the UK and you've been abroad from the UK and it's a really big pot. Then bringing it back to the UK could probably be the worst thing you could do, because all of a sudden that's now going to be subject to UK tax laws and inheritance tax changes and all the rest of it. So again, seek tax advice, etc. So, you really need to be making an informed decision. There's a particular carve out. I don't know if you ask it as a separate question, but for those with US residency, the advice we've had, again, seek tax advice, independent tax advice. Everyone's situation is technically speaking different, but again, this is quite homogenous. Unfortunately staying in the QROPS, even if it may not be suitable for you, you don't have a huge pot or whatever it may be, is really sort of the only option as far as we're concerned, given all the tax issues and stuff. And again, this is where making sure you have someone who's really informed and aware of what they're doing, because I've seen I've seen reviews for investment advisors saying, hey, absolutely fantastic, I've been trying for years to get out of my mine with STM, either one of the other providers, QROPS, although for a lot of US residents, STM seems to have been far the way the most used provider from our experience. Oh, fantastic, I finally got out of it. I've retired in the US and now I've finally got it out of there and I'm back in the UK SIP. And I'm like, oh my God, no, that is probably disastrous. You haven't done all this tax reporting, that reporting, regulatory reporting, or whatever it may be. You probably just that advisors probably just helped a client sabotage their retirement, but because they don't know what they're doing and because the client hasn't taken tax advice, hasn't spoken with others, they don't realize their advisors just help sabotage them. So again, you've really got to do your due diligence. Speak with people who are informed and knowledgeable on this. Get tax advice, especially if you're in a complicated jurisdiction, whether, where I contribute when I lived in that country, now I live in this country and I own these investments. And I read this about the tax man in my country not liking these schemes, which again was really important in America. So, it's really, really important you don't make any rash decision. You speak with properly, heavily regulated, qualified advisors who know what they're doing. And you make an informed decision, because, chances are you did not make an informed decision at the beginning. And, that's not to have a go at you. No one did. You moved abroad. You had a UK pension. You told your UK pension, I moved abroad. They gave you QROPS forms. You didn't need QROPS forms probably, but they gave you QROPS forms. So, everything was pushing you towards this, and you heard all these tax reasons. And, like most people, you said, oh, that sounds great, sign me up. And unfortunately, you didn't know the full story, because you weren't required at that time from the local regulations, wherever these people were, to tell you the full story. And that's why you're leaving these inquiries and you're watching this video right now.
Yeah, and I think, again, to bring up to modern day 2025, whilst we still think there's a lot of very bad advice happens in the international marketplace, I mean, there's still bad advice happens in the UK, but some of the instances we're talking about of very large commission bonds, very large commission trail paying funds, a lot of these have been cut out by trustees in places like Malta, or at least at a minimum trying to say, right, the maximum charge or the maximum total expense ratio of an underlying fund can be maximum 2% or 1.5% or whatever it is. There's also better disclosure now from a lot of trustees in Malta, including STM, where clients are more aware of what the charges of their ongoing funds are. If we roll back 10 years, that just wasn't common practice across the industry. You could even have advice reports being written to clients saying, okay, your STM charge is, say, £1,000, our ongoing charge is going to be X, Y, Z. Some advisory firms, when you look at clients' reports from 7 or 8 years ago, didn't even include the AMC of the fund, because for whatever reason, their compliance department and wherever they were based deemed it to be okay not to include those charges. So for a lot of people who even tried to do their homework, read the paperwork, yes, there would have been an attachment with the KID or whatever, the fund, which may have said the TER somewhere on page 97. But yeah, not easy for people to have worked out these things whilst you're busy, moving abroad, visas, kids, families, grandchildren's holidays, trying to have a successful career. Not always easy to have done perfect financial planning. So John, what would be your advice to someone then if they're sitting, watching this thinking, Christ, I think that's me, or I definitely think I need to have a look at this. What would be your advice to them now as a next step for having a chat with us or having a chat with any good regulated financial advisor they think could help them?
Yeah, well, selfishly, click the link below. No, but you know, you really want to be in a position where, hey, where are you regulated? You're in the UK, great. You need to find an FCA regulated advisor who really understands QROPS. Don't let them wing it, because they might make you, you know, you could be in a position where you regret the decision you've made. You live in the EU, make sure you get an EU regulated advisor. You live in the US, make sure you get an SEC regulated advisor. Make sure they talk about QROPS. So is QROPS mentioned in their reviews? Is QROPS mentioned on their website, on any other social media or anything like that? Do they have experience? Directly ask them. Again, be diligent, because then will ask, hang on, you know so much about QROPS. Were you one of these people selling them, you know, or mis-selling them or whatever you want? Because that's another reason, you know, someone might know a lot about QROPS. So, you know, get someone locally regulated with direct experience in assisting people just like you. Ask to speak to people just like you. You know, if a client comes to us and say, hey, I live in the UK, now I had a QROPS abroad, do you have anyone I could speak to? It's like, yeah, you do. Here you go. Here's my Rolodex. Plenty of people you can speak to who've helped just like you. So, you know, that's really important as well. You know, speak to the client's mouth again, because we're going to tell you, like, if you is a position where you're like, right, we are going to be getting you back into, or we're going to put you on a new investment platform, and you move to another QROPS provider, or move to a UK SIP if you're back in the UK, or whatever it may be. You know, you want to speak with someone, you know, when I tell you, hey, this is going to be a 6 to 9 month slog, it's going to be absolutely brutal, and it's going to feel like you're getting blood out of a stone. Some people think we're sort of embellishing. We're not. If anything, we're understating it. And that's why if you speak to a client who can tell you the ordeal they've gone through to get through it, even with a really, you know, admin dominant firm like us who does everything as well to try and streamline and make the process as smooth as possible, it's still an absolute ordeal, you know, often. You know, so, you know, it's, you know, we all get grey hair. You'll have grey hair by the end of it. I've got an extra few grey hairs by the time I've helped you get out of it, or change things. So yeah, you really need to, you know, get all your information together, and then go ahead and make a fully informed decision.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of clients say it's been over the past 10-year period. I mean, the last 10 years has been exceptional growth in the equity market. So even the most rubbish of funds, at least if they didn't go bust or liquidated structured notes, they may have had some growth in them. Obviously, it probably has been nowhere near as good as what it should have been, but your money may not have at least lost money. Obviously, if you have had structured notes and whatnot have been liquidated, then obviously, yeah, you may have had capital losses on that. But generally speaking, what's happened has happened. And as we say here at Cameron James, keep calm and pension on. Find the analysis, look what your options are now, and say, right, I've still got another 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 years for the money to be invested if you're actually going to pass it on to your beneficiaries and they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s. So take a really good logical decision now, and in 20 years' time, you can look back and say, okay, maybe the first 5, 10 or 15 years I've had my money invested in my QROPS, it wasn't particularly optimized with a financial advisor, but hey, at least the last 20 years, I've had it optimized and growing well. All right, Jonathan, thank you for all your thoughts and comments this morning on QROPS. I'll let you get back to your sunny morning in Richmond.
My day job, which probably involved some STM QROPS helping people this morning. So yeah.
Very good. All right, John, thanks for joining. And as always, viewers, take care with the UK pension assets.